he wasn't as unkillable as he is now.
Yeah.
Like there was a possibility that he could bleed to death. You know, if his healing factor, if he took too much damage before his healing factor, you know, like healed him, he can actually die.
Yeah.
Now it's like almost it's like they've made.
It's
him
almost
OP.
like the liquid term. You know.
Yeah. He's just and it's just, you know, the stories like each writer, you know, like trying to put him in even more dangerous situations.
To one up the
and so
it's almost like Rambo 1, 2, and 3. Like
and so I think back then, like Chris Claremont, those early like the 80s Wolverine, like he was my favorite X-Men, but and I think it's same thing. He was like mysterious. He like you didn't really know his origin, and he was edgy.
Yeah,
and you know, like
he was the rated R.
Yeah. He like he'll stab you. You know.
Yeah,
and then
and he doesn't have control.
Yeah.
Once he goes,
I'm like that. And you know, it's funny because like I like those Chris Claremont, like the new X-Men that, you know, like you know, Giant Size X-Men #1. You know, Storm, like she's one of my favorite characters, and Nightcrawler, and then a little later on, you know, Shadowcat joined in, Kitty Pryde, and but for some reason, like I think I really like Colossus, and I think he's not the most powerful. I think physically he's, you know, one of the strongest X-Men, but you know, just in general, he's not the most powerful, you know. But I think the reason I like him is because he's got all this physical power, but he's like a gentle soul.
Yeah,
and
he tries to avoid it.
He's an artist. You know, he loves to draw, and he was about, you know, his parents and his little sister Katya and you know, Kitty Pryde. And it's funny because that was like, thinking of it now, it was kind of like a little creepy because I think Shadowcat was like 13. And Colossus was like 17.
Yeah.
You know, but it was a different time too.
Yeah, it was a different time. It was like the movie Big. It was a different time.
Yeah, but you know, physically, you know, he's powerful. He's you know, bulletproof, and it's funny. Like I was just watching something on YouTube, like let's find out the secrets of Colossus, and they're, you know, and the guy who was making the video was like, we don't know this. I was like, what? Like they were talking about, is Colossus's eyes bulletproof? And it's like, well, this and that. And I was like, yes, they are. They can take up to, because there's a, you know, I'm the nerd that has the Marvel Universe comic books that goes into each character. Yeah. And it's like, it says right here, he could take up to a 45 caliber round in the eye. And you're saying there's no evidence that his eyes are bullet.
You don't have this?
You don't have, yeah. It's like, you're not a real fan, or, you know, it's like, you know, but yeah, no, I think I also like them. You know, he's like the strong, he looks cool, you know, just like, you know, when drawn by an, you know, an awesome artist, he looks beautiful, you know, like you know, the shining steel and you know, the muscles and stuff.
Yeah, I like, you know what's crazy? Like I knew Colossus, I knew some of his story, and then like seeing the Deadpools kind of got me to go back and kind of check him out a little bit more, because I'm like, wait a minute, this guy kind of like.
And it's funny because the Deadpool Colossus is almost like a caricature of the comic book. Like it's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
Of
but you can still see like the like, I don't want to have to do this.
Yeah.
Kidding. You know, like
or what I loved is that like Juggernaut, you know, is just a unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And Colossus is still, you know, he's not giving up. He's, you know, he gets knocked down. And I love I don't remember who, he had the little dent in the head. And you know, but he gets up and he goes, you know, just after him. But I think the interesting thing, like when you ask about my favorite character, you know, it's more of the team. Like my favorite character is, it's like an ensemble. They each play a certain role. So like, you know, like you said, like Gambit, you know, became, you know, your favorite X-Men, you know. But I remember like when he first, you know, was introduced, I was like, who's this outsider? He's not an X-Men, and you know, and he's been an X-Men now for what, like over 30 years.
Yeah, but it got me mad because I remember telling one of my friends who was like an original X, like he was like the 80s, then 90s, and I'm like, my favorite character is Gambit. And he's like, he's not an X-Men. Yeah. He's like the guy that they wrote in because you know, they have to add in. He was like,
they let him.
He needs time to prove that, because he's kind of like an X-Men. Like he was like, he's almost like
he's a tag along.
Yeah, like they were like he's like a mercenary.
Yeah,
X-Men. He's not really part of the team. They just when they need his thing. But I remember like, you know, drinking card playing gambler, like, and I was like, oh, my grandfather, right? So it was like, you know, kind of.
So it's interesting to see like why that character appeals to you. That you see. Yeah.
Well, I tell people like when they ask me about like who's your favorite Marvel, I'm like, my favorite comic book character is the Hulk, and people are like, why? I was like, because when I was young, I was angry and I was always big. So you know, people used to say when I get mad, I would like be like, you know, like rage, right? And so I was like, I related to him because it was like he didn't want to be like that, but it was like he would get to a point and he'd lose control. And then like Black Panther, I remember like the first time I saw like Africa, like, and it's amazing when you think about it because the new Black Panthers, it gave such a pride to people, right? But I was happy, because Black Panther, I'm like, wait a minute. In Africa, these huge, like, modern cities, and then you actually do research, and it's like, oh, there are huge modern cities, but have all this historical, and, like, he's the smartest, and he knows how to, like, and then he has, like, the, you know...
and the vibranium suit.
And it's like, and then how everybody's, and then you learn the history of Africa, and you realize that, like, all the resources that all the colonizing places go in and just try to steal from these places.
Yeah, just like, you know, taking the wealth, you know, from the continent,
and then seeing like in the new Black Panther how they kind of, you know, mirrored that with like
or like, you know,
Latin and South
like
America.
Earlier in the year, I love, you know,
more,
like,
you know,
like covering, you know, like you know, those early African, you know, civilizations, and you know, and asking the kid, and a lot of kids actually know, you know, like who is the wealthiest man in history,
you know, like and
you know, and it's cool to you know, kind of almost like revisit that with Wakanda, and you know that you have this wealthy, you know, hidden civilization in Africa, and because like I remember as a kid actually having a chance to go to Africa when I was in high school, and just thinking, man, I don't want to get eaten by a lion, and because that was my whole idea of
Africa.
What Africa? You know, it's like I'm going to be in some dusty.
Because you know what you're taught. That's it.
Yeah. Like you know what? I watched Tarzan.
Yeah, or like you just watch the stupid, like when you're in high school science class and the teacher doesn't want to teach. They roll in the you know, they roll in the TV and they put on like the English dude talking about as the lion hunts, and all you see and all you see is like the savannah, the Serengeti, and they're like, oh, and then you have people that are half naked or like they're you know, you see they're naked and you're like and it's like you think that it's like, where are their clothes? How come they're not? I get yelled at when I run. You know, when you're little, you know, you jump out the bath and then you run down, and your mom's like, "Put some clothes on," you know, and it's like, and then you realize, like, as you get older, you like see like actual cities with people on phones, and you're like, and beautiful houses
and malls
and malls, and you're like, this never, and colorful clothes, and you know, and you're like, okay, like, you know, so it's kind of, but it's funny how that, like, Professor X, I remember, like, I do with X-Men, I do see why you say it's more the team, because I think X-Men is a beautiful, like, because you have all these personalities, right? And I almost think of it like Professor X, like, Charles Xavier's like the coach.
Yeah.
And he's got all these superstars. And he's got to, listen, we got to go and take care of Magneto and all those people. And then later on, when you find out, like, Stan Lee wrote it based on, like, you know, problems in the United and the differences. In
and, like,
people.
a lot of people make that analogy
like
of
Malcolm versus
X.
Martin. And you start realizing that, like, wow, like, that's like, off the hook.
And that's the thing with Chris Claremont. He, like, when he wrote X-Men, you know, like, so he had, like, I think it's a 16-year run on X-Men, and he didn't write down to his readers. And so, like, a lot of, I remember reading that comic book, and what is this? What's this word?
Yeah, what does this mean? Yeah.
And looking it up, and, you know, and just, you know, and he would, like, introduce philosophy and history and religion. I think I told you, if you ever get the chance to read God Loves, Man Kills.
Yep.
And that, you know, that's an awesome story. And but outside of, so X-Men was, and during the 80s they had X-Men, and it was so successful that they had New Mutants.
Yeah.
And then they brought back the original X-Men with X Factor.
Yeah.
And then they had X-Force. and Excalibur,
and then it got too much. Like it almost got yeah.
And during the 90s, I think that's when I gave Marvel a little break, and I like for the first time, like before I was like DC fooey, and then I started reading, and it was because of a roommate at Eastern at college, and he was like hey, you remember those Super Friends cartoons? I was like, yeah, do they have a comic book? And I was like, I'm sure they do. And I went, and around that time, I think it was Grant Morrison came out with JLA.
Okay.
And it was issue 1, and I picked it up for him, and I picked one up for myself, and I just started reading from there. Yeah. And so 90s was like DC, and I learned to appreciate DC, and I got into other stuff. But for Marvel, I think the hero that wasn't a mutant that caught my eye, and probably one you like too, is the Punisher, Frank Castle.
Oh yes.
And
I think like the whole Luke Cage was like, I remember reading Luke Cage, like one of my best friends, he had it, and then like Iron Fist, and it was kind of cool just to read. Because like when we talked about it when we watched it on Netflix, like how Iron Fist was kind of like a bitch.
Yeah,
like, it's like, yo, why would you make him like such a Daredevil?
Yeah, he was.
Like I remember Daredevil, like just like kind of like, this dude can't see, but yeah, he can knock you out. Like
and I don't know.
They almost made Elektra more badass than Daredevil. In Luke Cage. They did that. I thought they did him a service versus this service.
Daredevil, I remember coming across it during the 80s, and just it was almost too gritty for me. It was too. It was not like your PG-13. Yeah, no, because I think like his girlfriend ended up like getting addicted to like drugs, and I think she ended up being a prostitute at some point, and it was like wow, this is real street. Yeah. And then you have Elektra, and she was like his former lover, but now she was trying to kill him.
Yeah, and
then she ended up getting taken out by Bullseye, famously with the side, like he killed her with her own weapon, and I was just and so I got back into it. I want to say in like maybe like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, Daredevil, and it's just like the Netflix, Daredevil, like really, in my opinion, did credit to Daredevil. Like it caught the grittiness.
Yeah,
of it,
like versus the movie with Ben Affleck, where it's like kind of like trying to
dumb
it down.
It was too polished. In a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like Luke Cage was good, but then when they came out with Iron Fist and I like Jessica Jones. That was pretty good because it was dark.
And the funny thing is that I never read like Jessica Jones. Like her comic book was Alias, and I remember seeing it at the comic book shop, but just like, what's this? And I think it might have been a different imprint of Marvel Comics. I think it was called like Marvel Knights or Max. It might have been Max, which was a more mature line. And that comic book was real dark. So, like the Netflix, show, I think captured a lot of that.
But for some reason they went into like the Iron Fist. They kind of went like really.
Yeah, and then what really upset me was the Defenders when they brought them all together.
It was, what it was? It almost felt rushed.
Yeah.
It almost felt like they were just like,
you remember the hand? Yeah. In Daredevil, they seemed like very mysterious and like, oh my god. And then they're like this shadow organization and like from Asia. And then when it was on the Defenders, it looks like, man, I think the organization had like 30 dudes and it's like not, and there was just like a few Asians now. It's like
it's like what happened? Like,
what happened to the feel of it? And I think it was the director of Iron Fist that ended up directing Defenders too, and he took that cornball feel.
Yeah, it was like, just man,
Yeah, but unfortunately, like I think with Iron Fist and Luke Cage or Power Man, I don't think I appreciated them until much later. Like as a kid, I think they were just like low level street characters.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just because it wasn't larger than life. They were more like somebody you would know.
But
you know what I mean? Like in a sense, like it was like, I know a guy that charm. I know a guy that can knock somebody out. Yeah. Like I've seen guys throw people through windows. Like, calm down. I've seen big dudes like that are strong.
Punisher, I think and then I think the 80s had a lot of, like, you know, or even the 70s, like vigilantes, like Death Wish,
anti-heroes,
the anti-hero,